Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Apologies if I've mentioned this a lot over the last few days, weeks, months, or even year. But last year I was asked to write a book on innovation after watching hundreds and hundreds of TED Talks. But bear with me, it's not every day that someone like me can say the words, "Hey, my new book is out now." So I'm going to be milking it for a while I can, and hopefully you can find it in your heart to forgive me. But if you are interested in the topic of innovation and TED Talks, look for me, Neil C. Hughes, on Amazon, and a book entitled Great TED Talks Innovation. Or check out more details on my website over at techblogwriter.co.uk. But with my very own book plug out of the way, today I've invited Rich L. Stuppy, who is the Chief Customer Experience Officer at Kount, onto the podcast today. And for those of you that don't know, Kount is the Identity Trust Global Network that is helping businesses upgrade their fraud prevention. And they do that with the largest network of trust and risk data, all linked by adaptive AI for real-time fraud prevention, account takeover protection, and personalised customer experiences. And Rich works with executives from all areas of the commerce payments and fraud prevention ecosystems to discover trends and develop strategies that can cause business, that can create value. And Rich is also a highly sought-after speaker for industry events and has addressed audiences all over the world on several topics surrounding payments and fraud. So come with me all the way to Idaho in the US so we can speak with Rich now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Great. Thank you very much for having me. I really do appreciate it. My name is Rich Stuppy. I'm the Chief Customer Experience Officer at Kount. In that role, I'm responsible for working with our clients as we help protect them from fraud across the globe.
Fantastic. And to begin with, I've got to ask, just for people listening and hearing about you for the first time, can you set the scene and tell me all about Kount Identity's Trust Global Network and the kind of problems that you set out to solve from those early days when you first started?
You bet. And we have been at this for quite some time, since 2007. And basically what we do is we help businesses protect themselves from people that use stolen credit cards, stolen identities, stolen credentials to commit fraud against their businesses. So in that world, there's a massive amount of losses that is caused by stolen credit cards and people stealing goods and services, and also a massive amount of losses that are caused by people taking over accounts that don't really belong to them. And once they own that account, whether it's a bank, an email, a wallet, whatever, once they own that account, they act as if they're that person and cause a lot of damage, steal a lot of stuff, and in general, create havoc for those businesses.
And one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today was that I recently read that Kount's first adaptive protection solution for account takeover fraud. When I read the announcement to that, so can you tell me a little bit more about that announcement? And do you have any stats at all that you could possibly share around the scale of the problem that you're tackling here?
Oh yeah, you bet. So at a high level, what adaptive protection means is balancing both negative signals, which would be like risk signals or danger signals, and positive assurance signals, which are indicators that this person or on the other end of the computer is in fact who they say they are, and they are acting in a benevolent way, not a malicious way. And so in that context, when you know someone is good, you should give them an experience that is friction-free and maybe even remove some of the normal checks that are required and make it super easy for them to transact. If they're clearly risky, then you give them, you might block them, you might give them an experience where it wastes their time and doesn't give them a chance to extract value. And if they're in the middle, you can give them an experience where that small segment that are sort of in the middle, you give them an experience, well, to where maybe do some sort of step-up authentication or some minor activity for them to prove who they say they are. And in that way, you give your customers the best possible experience and collect all the available revenue and stop all the potential losses. And you do it in a way that is actually good for your brand. So that's a very high level. And you mentioned a question about stats.
Yeah.
So when it comes to account takeover, as people are transacting or trying to log in, we have customers that say have 100 million logins attempted on their platform a month. That's just an example number. It could be higher, it could be lower. But because of the automated tools and the things that are attacking these accounts, 70 to 95% of the activity is machine-generated malicious activity. So that's a gigantic number of attacks happening every second of every day. And then in the payment space, we stop hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud a month from companies all over the globe, from customers and devices that are literally in every country and territory across the globe, including places like Antarctica and places you would not think are transacting in e-commerce.
Some huge figures there. And a question I've got to ask is, because obviously I'm in the UK lockdown, you're in the US lockdown at the moment. How is the current climate and the global pandemic impacting your business at the moment?
Well, it is certainly, as we serve our customers, it is certainly changing many of their businesses. Some for the better, some for the worse. I think you could logically think and recognize that travel and entertainment is having a really, really hard time right now. But counterbalancing that, we have food delivery, e-commerce, physical delivery, furniture, fashion. All of these segments are actually up dramatically. And in general, to use kind of the stock market parlance, the advancers are far outperforming the decliners. So we're seeing a significant increase in volume, and it's across multiple segments as people are forced to adapt the digital lifestyle during this lockdown.
I've also read that Kount has also shared their new consumer purchasing data culled from its Identity Trust network of more than 6,500 digital businesses and payment providers. But before we dive into that report and look for any insights, can you tell me a little bit more about the background and the story behind it?
Sure. So one of the components that you do when you're protecting businesses from fraud is you collect and create a lot of data. And we see data that includes the purchase and behavior, and we see data that includes, the devices and just a wide variety of different data points. And so we can aggregate that and anonymize that and analyze that data to look for interesting trends that can not only help us fight fraud, but can also help our customers adapt to what they're seeing. And we are seeing a significant amount of adaptation happening from our customers.
So another question I've got to ask then, what were the big e-commerce data trends that you noticed in that report?
Yeah, so the things that were up really big were businesses like home furnishing, these craft stores, we created a bespoke segment that was called Wines and Craft to reflect the mood that was happening, where people were, I think, drinking a little wine and doing a little cross stitch or whatever to pass the evening time. We saw a significant increase in health and fitness. Pet supplies and sporting goods are also up very high. And we see lots of examples of individual niche markets that are up, 800,000% since this began.
And was anything in the report surprising to you at all?
Oh yeah. I was really shocked at when we looked at, in particular, the vertical of quick service restaurants, which we have many, many, many customers in that quick service restaurant vertical, how some that had a more mature digital philosophy were able to react differently to governmental decrees and really adapt and grow their digital sales. I was really surprised at how some companies were able to accelerate their ship from store, for example, is a great example, or buy online and pick up curbside, or buy online and pick up in store, where they could maintain the social distancing and sell their services and goods, even in a very challenging time. The ones that were able to do that had the more mature strategies. The ones that struggled were less mature, and they couldn't really pivot, and they couldn't turn on a dime, so to speak, to enable some of these new capabilities to put their brand in front of their customers.
So taking into account all those insights you uncovered there, and the fact that we are living in a period of uncertainty at the moment, and it's very challenging for a lot of businesses and individuals, how do you think it's going to change the landscape as we know it?
I do think we have crossed a point, and some things are never going back. Yeah. I think some of that might be good, some of that might be bad. But I think you can think logically and just say there were a whole bunch of people in the world that were able to pick and choose whether they wanted to do digital, and sometimes they chose not to do digital. And they preferred the traditional face-to-face interaction, and they enjoyed it, and it was a great experience for them. But now they've been forced to kind of get real-life training in how that can happen, how it can work. I mean, my parents are in their 70s, and they're ordering groceries online. It does, like, that would not have happened in the year 2019, let me tell you, not by a long shot. And so I think we've seen this step function where everybody has had to go digital, and certainly we'll enjoy a face-to-face and a very personal experience, hopefully again sometime soon. But this digitization has created a real step function in adoption.
And presumably then, as more and more people go digital, do you think these providers of digital goods and services are just naturally going to see an increase in criminal payment and fraud and credential stuffing and account takeover fraud and all those kind of things? We're just going to see an increase in that as well, won't we?
I think that is, why do they rob banks? It's because that's where the money is. Why do they commit digital fraud? It's because you can get it easy and not get caught. And not get stopped. So yeah, I think one can't help but assume it's going to be, there's going to be more and more often. And when I talked about this idea of kind of the merging of a digital customer journey, so with the physical customer journey, so thinking in terms of buy online, pick up curbside, or buy online, pick up in store, that sort of stuff. When you think about that new journey, there's a lot more touch points there, And the more touch points is more attack surface, essentially, for the bad guys and the fraudsters to hit. And so it makes the problem a lot harder to solve.
And there is a lot of doom and gloom on those 24-hour rolling news channels at the moment. So before I let you go, I'd love to end on a positive note. So what is it that makes you hopeful about the future?
I am thankful that despite this tragic, unfortunate, and downright bad set of circumstances, it happened now versus happening 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. We've got better technology. We've got better options. We've got, we're so much better than in a better position to stay safe and fight back and do the right things today than we would have been a decade ago, or maybe even a year ago, or maybe even a few months ago. And we will persevere, and we will adapt, and we will again enjoy a nice pint or glass of wine in your somewhere nice with someone nice, and we will persevere.
Or maybe even a pint of wine and a glass of beer. Maybe that's a little bit too much.
Well, personally, I'm willing to risk it. So maybe.
But I completely agree with you there, especially about persevering and adapting. There is so much hope and things to look forward to in the future. And for anyone that would like to find out more information about the work you're doing at Kount, can you just point them in the direction of how they can find you online, and equally contact your team if they've got any questions?
You bet. You can easily go to Kount.com, KOUNT.com. If you'd like to have a more personal dialogue, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. My name is Rich Stuppy. There's only a couple of us in the world, and one of them is my son. So if you were to get him, he would redirect that. But look for Rich Stuppy and Kount on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to point you in the right direction.
Fantastic. Well, I'll add those links to the blog post that will accompany this podcast episode on my website over at techblogwriter.co.uk. But there's just so much hope and so much great information and so much value in this conversation today. So I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to chat with me on a Monday afternoon as we record this. And hopefully we can have another catch up later on in the year. But more than anything, just thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, indeed. Always happy to do it, Neil. Very much looking forward to another discussion, and I really appreciate you having us on, and I really appreciate the discussion.
I love that positive end to the podcast there. And Kount's Identity Trust Global Network is delivering real-time fraud prevention that enables personalised customer experiences for more than 6,500 leading brands and payment providers. And it's all linked by Kount's award-winning AI. The Identity Trust Global Network, which analyses signals from 32 billion annual interactions, which blows my mind. And it does that in order to customise user experiences across the spectrum of trust, from frictionless experiences to blocking fraud. And the end goal, of course, is to quickly and accurately make identity trust decisions, deliver safe payments, account creation and login events, while ultimately reducing digital fraud, chargebacks, false positives and manual reviews. But if this is your area of expertise, please let me know. I'd love to hear more about your insights. So email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. So a big thank you to Rich for joining me on the podcast. But hey, guess what? An even bigger warm thank you to each and every one of you for listening to this podcast, listening to me getting overexcited about my new book coming out, and just for being there. What I'm trying to say is a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.